Oh, no. All right, welcome to the Cinescoots podcast. Today we are recording episode 3. I am your host, Javier, with me.
And I am your host, bitch, Nano.
Oh, my host, bitch. Beautiful. Today we are discussing the Foo Fighters, Studio 666.
Someone give him the best. The best. This movie was not the best, but it wasn't bad.
It was not the best, but all right. So I think this is one of those movies that you can give your little sentence blurb if you really want to, but I think this movie is best enjoyed kind of with no expectation. So either you've seen it or you don't.
Yes.
I think we're just going straight into spoilers. We'll talk all behind the scenes stuff later, but my goodness, this movie is wild.
Wild indeed. So do you want to start off with your little 2-second review?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start today. So I think as a middling fan of the Foo Fighters,
that was a great concert at Wrigley.
It was a fantastic concert at Wrigley. I loved it. I would love to go see them again for sure. But I'm not a diehard, right? I really enjoyed it. I think that you see a lot of the chemistry from the band kind of come through on the screen, which is great. It's supposed to be a horror comedy, but I think it's not nearly as funny as I think it could be. There are better horror comedy starting musicians out there, or better comedy starting musicians out there. But overall, I definitely think it's a recommendation if you are a fan of A, horror comedies, and B, the Foo Fighters.
Yes, I think that's fair. So I think I went into it expecting Pick of Destiny. While I watched, I was kind of more pleasantly surprised that it was more horror-ish than a Pick of Destiny type movie.
Okay.
And now, as I get further and further from seeing the movie, I wish I had kind of seen Pick of Destiny.
Instead, right? Or to compare?
Or that type of movie. I think the horror elements really worked.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, the comedy is not peak. And I feel like a horror comedy would have been more memorable than what we got.
Yeah. There were a few things, though, that I thought were really cool. I liked a lot of the musical score. Not necessarily the music that they did, the actual Foo Fighters. It was good, don't get me wrong. It did get to the point where I was getting kind of frustrated. The whole thing is they're trying to make this one really long, 40-minute track.
Yeah.
Which nowhere in that movie that I ever feel like they were actually making what I would even consider a 40-minute track. Because it was just the same, repetitively. Which I guess you could argue that maybe it's part of, the insanity of it.
Right.
But it got to the point where I was like, all right, I don't need to hear 50 seconds to 2 minutes of this straight again. But the actual score of the music I thought was really, really cool. Do you know who was involved in making the score for this movie?
I do not know who was involved in making the score for this movie.
So John Carpenter, he actually has a cameo. He's one of the guys who works the soundboards and stuff.
Wiggity.
Yeah, and so when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of the music you would hear in the background of a Halloween. And yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. He's the one who wrote the music for Halloween, so that was really cool. I really like that underlying score. I thought that was really good and effective for that feeling of, a slasher / horror movie.
Yeah. So while like I was saying, while I kind of wanted more of the comedy, I will say, not that I was like spooked to my core by any means,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt like decently on edge in that movie.
Yes.
And I think the score plays a huge part in that, as well as the mystery of like kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
The some of those kills are fantastic.
Ooh, the practical effects were great.
Exactly. So I think, like I said, I wanted more comedy, but I was impressed that they did horror better than A, I wanted them to do, and then B, better than I expected them to do. So I have to give them some props.
So, alright, level with me here. Would this movie have been better if it was just a straight up horror movie?
Well, so here's the thing. Okay, I don't have like a great analogy to give. If it was a straight up horror movie without the Foo Fighters, right? Then I just don't think I'd be able to take it seriously, because I'd be like, it's the fucking Foo Fighters. Like, if you look at Pat Smear, he just has such a lovable face. And
he's a big oaf.
Yeah, so like I mean, if he was expected to just play that shit seriously, like, I don't think I would have been able to take it seriously. Great context. This is the first year I've seen the Scream movie, ever, right?
Yes.
So, while that's satirical, I think it's more on the serious spectrum than something like this. And if like the Foo Fighters were in Scream, I feel like I would just not stop laughing. So if you took the plot of this movie, which is still ridiculous enough where it can't really be a straight up horror movie, and took the Foo Fighters out of it, maybe. But you know what? Given the plot, no, I don't think this could be a serious horror movie.
Interesting. See, I would say that this would be it would be better if it was maybe a little bit more just straight horror with some humor elements in it. Where there were some parts in the movie where I was like, okay, this is just like really silly. The fight scene at the end where Dave Grohl is fighting, what's his name? Jeff Garlin?
We should. By the way, we should make a category of movies. I got it. It's called movies that think they deserve to have the Return of the King ending, but have no business having.
Thana, wait until you watch the Batman.
I'm excited to watch the Batman.
Oh yeah, but if you're thinking of like Return of the King levels of endings, that movie's got some. But it gets to the point where you're like, do I need to watch David Grohl and Jeff Garlin kick each other in the dick for like 2 minutes? Again, no. You could have played that a little bit more straight, and I think it would have been a little bit better. It would have hit better with the ending of the movie, where you have Dave being the only survivor of basically this weird satanic cult ritual, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like the ending of the movie itself ends very, very serious, right? Like, he's alone in his green room, his eyes are all blacked out, and you're like, oh man, this is kind of like a fucked ending. Like, all his friends are dead, but it's preceded by seriously like 5 or 6 nut shots.
Yes. So now that you like reminded me of what the ending shot is, you reminded me of how much I disliked it when I saw it in theaters. And now I just like kind of hate that ending shot. Right? Like, I don't want to think of a world with Dave Grohl without the Foo Fighters, right?
Yeah, he works best that way, right? Like, I don't think he's the kind of guy that could. He could definitely have a successful solo career, I think, but I don't think I want that.
Exactly, and like I know it's supposed to be a sad ending, but I just rather not get it. So here's the thing: of all the different ending beats, the one that I want to keep the most is Jeff Garlin, Dave Grohl, nuts fight. We talked about this, but the one I want to get rid of the most is whenever the band that originally haunted the mansion, comes back to form, and then they do some spooky stuff.
Yeah, so for people who maybe are just listening and not actually watch the movie, like the whole point of it is it's very similar to Cabin in the Woods, Evil Dead. You have a group of people who go to this house and they all end up getting killed, and now it's kind of happening again to the Foo Fighters, right? And so then we have this band called
you can't even remember. And
Dead Widow, I think.
Yeah, but here's why you can't even remember. You ready?
Yeah.
That band is the equivalent to the Toaster Scooter Gang in Book of Boba Fett. Just like very generic looking, like generic borderline ugly, like super forgettable, no redeemable qualities, right? That's who that band is.
There is one redeemable quality, and it is that the singer is Jenna Ortega, and I'm kind of on the Jenna Ortega high right now.
She fine. And you know who else was fine was the girl from the biker gang in Boba Fett, who looks like Hayley Williams. So there you go.
She does. You know, speaking of, I know this is a tangent, but when that episode aired, I watched it. I was like, "This is fucking stupid," but it is what it is, right? And down the week, I saw somebody on Twitter post like, "Oh, look, Hayley Williams is on this episode of Boba Fett." I was like, "Wait, hold on a second. Excuse me? I bought it for a too long. I was about to message you, be like, Tano, I missed this."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
So I can't name you any band members in Yellow Card. Someone on Reddit posted that the one girl looked like someone from Yellow Card, and I looked up Yellow Card a couple days later, and I think it's all dudes. But I totally bought it. I was like, yes, this girl is from this generic 2000s pop punk band. Like I totally believe it.
Yeah, and you do get that, right? You do kind of get this like, oh, they're a very generic Evanescence looking band, or name any band, Nightwish, shit. Like you'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I think it was weird that you cast someone who is right now kind of running high as Jenna Ortega for this role.
Yeah.
Now you probably don't really know her from anything other than maybe Scream, right?
No.
Okay.
I do not.
All right. So she was in that You show that like was really popular.
Okay.
The only reason I know that is because Katie like watches it.
Netflix. Right?
Netflix. She's in Jane the Virgin. She's playing Wednesday Addams in like a new Addams Family thing.
Oh, good for her.
So and she was in Scream, right? She was like, I would say maybe the secondary protagonist in Scream, right?
Yeah.
So like she's got this high, and she is in this movie for maybe all of 2 minutes, maybe less.
Be funny sometimes.
Yeah, and I know this movie was it was made in the hush hush, right? Like it was made during the pandemic. Like it was a secret project. Nobody really knew what was happening. I think we just found out about this like a month ago, right?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, I found out about it when I saw the trailer in theaters.
Yeah, I think it was when we went to see Scream.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it was kind of like okay. But I feel like that could have been a little bit better. And so to that end, I think that because of the way the story was going, we went on a whole fucking tangent here. But back to kind of your point about that being the ending that you would get rid of, I feel like that's the ending that I would keep.
The Chloe Ortega ending.
Yeah, the Jenna Ortega ending. They defeat the thing that was like a big pile of like goop after he pukes it out. And then you still get the satisfaction of like, oh, there were some cool deaths. And Dave is alive, and so are a couple of his band buddies. It's sad that some of them died, but he's still got some friends. And you know, that could have been a good ending, and that would have been a nice, tight 90 minutes. Boom, boom, let's go. And then it kept going for like another 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, and ironically, you know, this movie doesn't really have exposition, right? I mean, it kind of does in the scene with Jeff Garlin, and like he's a dick and he's at the record label, and then they're like, we're gonna get you. And like, you know that, you know, Jeff and the lady that they have who hooks the Foo Fighters up with this place know more than they're letting on.
Yes.
But there isn't a whole lot of setup for this movie, and I think it suffers rather significantly from that.
And that's where I think the movie could have been, instead of having those 15 minutes at the end with the Jeff Garlin ball kicking, you could have had like a 15-minute long cold open with the former band, right? You get to know the band, you get to kind of see, you know, the singers going crazy, and then boom, everybody gets offed, and then you kind of feel like, shit, it sucks that Jenna Ortega died, and then at the end you see them, they take down the caretaker, and you're like, oh, you know, good for them, they got their revenge, some of the Foo Fighters are still alive, and you have a solid movie, and you still have the same runtime. But this movie, you know, again, it's based on a story by Dave Grohl. You can only do so much with that.
So it was interesting. I learned something about the production of this movie that actually made me like it less. So I think I saw it on the Hot Ones episode that just came out with Dave Grohl.
Ooh, I haven't seen that yet.
So, and forgive me if I'm spreading fake news, but here's what I remember.
Okay.
So they're working on their 10th studio album, right? Mm-hmm. I believe, yes, it was in like a house or a studio that was rumored to be haunted.
Okay.
Fucking Dave Grohl is the one who comes up with the idea for this movie and like convinces the Foo Fighters that they should do this movie. Mm-hmm. Now, what made that unlikable for me was, you know, he kind of is this trope in the film of the, you know, the egotistical frontman, right? Mm-hmm. And in this movie, he's the egotistical frontman who just like makes his, you know, band record. And then I was like, you drag them into like to this, you know what I'm saying? Like he was. I don't think he was malicious. I don't think there's ill will between him and the Foo Fighters by any means. But I'm like, this was all your pet project, and like this was like the best that you were to come up with. I feel like if I was in the band and then like he dragged me through making this movie, then I would want something better than what we got. So
I understand that idea, right? Like of, you know, he wants to do this and he wants to make his band do this. The one aspect where I'm like, maybe not so much is, this is a band that's been around for so goddamn long.
Yeah, and I feel like
and so I feel like maybe for them this was like a hey, why not? All of their music videos are basically short films.
Yeah,
they are all fucking bonkers. That's one of the only reasons why I really like the Foo Fighters. Like, their music, I think, is good. Don't get me wrong. But for me, nothing gets more joy out of me and Foo Fighters than watching a Foo Fighters music video.
Oh, even the one that I think it's from the album Concrete and Gold, so one of their newer albums. Mm-hmm. But they've got that like headbanger song where I think they're all old men.
Yes.
Right? And that album itself isn't that great, but that video slaps.
The video slaps. So I think this was... Well, yes, I agree that like it's weird that this is what he wants to do, and that maybe it feels like he wants to convince them. I feel like this was not a very like arm twisty thing. He was like, "Hey, let's do a movie. We can't do anything else, right?" Because a lot of bands did not want to record an album during the pandemic.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of work to make an album, and then you can't tour during a pandemic. But you can film a movie.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, you know, the movie is relatively low budget, all things considered, right? You can kind of tell it's a single location. There's not a lot of like fancy camera work. I think the most expensive thing has to be the practical kills.
Yes.
Like from my venture into like the horror movie like rabbit hole, I found out that practical effects are hella expensive.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like, if you fuck one up, like, that's it.
Exactly.
You can only make one, what's his name? Rami Jaffe or whatever? You can only make one of his puppets and saw it in half.
Yeah. So, it was interesting. So I was about to say two sentences that are going to be contradictory to each other. So I was going to say, to get your explanation of how it was not arm twisty, and at the same time, I just kind of wish if they were going to go this route, they made something that was more bonkers. And at the same time, the next sentence I was going to say was, how about that fucking chainsaw kill?
And that's the thing, like, I think those are like the strengths of the movie, right?
Yeah. Like,
the strengths of the movie are the band's chemistry. You feel like they give each other shit, but like they care about each other. And that comes across very well. And overall, all the kills are pretty legit.
Yeah, the barbecue kill.
The barbecue kill was good. And then showing him eating him.
Yes.
That was pretty good. Hilarious. That was fucking funny as hell, because you're like, oh yeah, he's eating fucking barbecue.
So did you go into it thinking that if they were all going to die, Taylor Hawkins would be the last surviving one? Because I did.
Kinda, because I feel like he's one of the most prevalent ones, right? Like, when I think of Foo Fighters, I only really think of Dave and Taylor.
Taylor Hawkins, I think, is the Blue Ranger of the Foo Fighters. Right? Like, Dave's the Red Ranger.
Ooh, not the White Ranger. Interesting.
So here's why I say Blue Ranger. And I don't just mean like one Power Rangers, I mean like all the Power Rangers. The Blue Ranger is always, the second in command, and he always gets an episode about him being the second in command. Right? There's always a Blue Ranger character development episode where he gets to shine. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think Taylor Hawkins is the Blue Ranger.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought Taylor Hawkins would be either the one who survived, or if they were all going to die, I thought he would make it to the end. So,
yeah,
expectations subverted.
Yeah, for sure. So, have you ever seen Evil Dead?
I have not.
Okay, so like I was kind of saying earlier, the movie really kind of leans into that, like for the first half, right? Like almost to the point of, how he finds that book.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's the Necronomicon. Like, it's almost one for one. It's a book with a fucking face. It's made of human skin, and it's got a bunch of weird like satanic shit in it. And it's got that silliness to it, which I really enjoyed. And like we've been saying, I think if it had leaned more into the silliness, it probably would have been better for it. But then you also have to consider that these are not trained actors; they are musicians, and yeah. I think you kind of have to allow just a little bit of wiggle room to be like, well, they did their best.
I think as I talk about this film, I get more to the point where I kind of was where I left the theater, where I was like, I had a good time. Was it the best? No. Would I watch this, this coming Halloween season, drunk with some friends? Absolutely.
Oh, for sure. I think it would be a good experience to watch with friends who maybe don't want to watch like a super scary like Halloween movie.
Yeah.
And I think it has that barrier of entry of like, hey, the Foo Fighters, right? Check this out.
I think this is one of the perfect movies to walk in with like low expectations.
Sure.
And then just have so much more fun than you anticipated having.
And that's the thing, right? The movie is really, really fun. I think there's a lot of, even though, like we said, there are no real trained actors in the initial cast, but you have a pretty solid supporting cast, right? Whitney Cummings as the hot nosy neighbor is pretty good. She serves as the exposition dump.
Yes.
Like, again, the movie not being the greatest at the craft. It's the whole show don't tell thing. Well, she just tells you everything.
Right.
Like, I don't even think the band is even like remotely aware that something's wrong with Dave until she's like, "Oh yeah, he's possessed." They're like, "Oh yeah, that's just Dave being Dave."
Yeah. I love the running jokes about Pat. Pat just like sleeping in the kitchen.
Yeah, just like sleeping in the trash.
Yeah, but that speaks to your point. Like, not for a while in the film, like despite the frustrations that they can't leave, they're pretty like see this. They pretty much see this as like kind of business as usual.
Yeah, they're just fucking a bunch of dudes being dudes, I guess.
Yeah,
which is it's fine.
It has a charm. It has a charm to it.
Yeah. So one of the funniest cameos I think I've seen in a while is in this movie. It's the Lionel Richie bit.
Yes.
I don't know why that hit me, like, just right in the funny bone. That's my song, motherfucker.
It was certainly...
I was not expecting. I was just like, oh, this is just going to be a very, like, a closed set. No silly cameos. And then Lionel Richie shows up.
Yeah. So okay, kind of back to my initial critique. How do you think you would have felt if this movie was just like bonkers over the top, drum duel versus the devil, right? Like, how would you feel if this movie took that direction?
I think if you had gotten a team to work with Dave, because clearly he didn't write. It's his story, right? The way it works is he comes up with the story, but he basically just kind of gives the beats, right? He's like, hey, we're gonna make a movie about being in a haunted house trying to make an album. And then it's up to the actual screenplay writers to then come up with the details, right? And from what I was looking at, overall, they're pretty new screenwriters for the most part. Definitely one of them, I think that she's only got like 4 credits under her name. Rebecca Hughes. Yeah, she's got 5 writing credits, including this one. A TV movie, a TV episode, and something else.
As a brief aside, I feel like she has the type of name where if I name dropped her to you and like you were intimidated and wanted to just like feel like you knew what I was talking about, like I could make it seem like she had written, a million things.
Oh, for sure.
Like, Rebecca Hughes has a long career, and you'd be like, oh, of course.
Of course.
Rebecca Hughes just broke the record for.
And the other guy who wrote the movie too, his name is Jeff Buhler, something like that. Yeah. He is primarily a horror writer. He's got The Grudge, Jacob's Ladder, Pet Sematary, The Prodigy, Night Flyers. And so I feel like because of looking at his filmography, like I'm not seeing that like ability to be like, hey, let's go like super over the top.
Yeah.
I think, and this is just me kind of, projecting, I guess. I feel like maybe the most fun in the movie was the kills, and I feel like that's where I could see the Foo Fighters being more involved. Like, I could totally see, like,
because they're not cliche.
No, they're very creative. I could totally see Taylor being like, "Oh yeah," and then throw a cymbal because I'm a drummer, and you're gonna cut my head off with it. Like, that's the kind of shit that I feel like where they had fun. But like, other than the kills, I feel like everything else was very like middle of the road. A lot of the scares were pretty, they were effective, sure, but they were pretty standard horror scares. Right? Like you're walking and then something's walking behind you. It's very, very, very standard.
The ghoulie ghouls are very generic. To continue our Power Rangers, analogies, the ghoulie ghoul spooky spooks very much look like your grunt Power Rangers level villains, kind of.
Yeah, the generic like putties.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see that.
But I think for any fault that this movie has, though, I will say is inoffensive.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like this is a movie that you can watch, and even if someone goes, "Hey, this is a fun movie," and you have that expectation of fun, I feel like it's such a bar though that the movie is easily able to clear. Like, you're not going into this expecting like top tier horror, right? You're not expecting like Hereditary. You're not expecting the Babadook. You're expecting something silly. Like, you can't be mad at the movie for not being better than it is.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of movie.
All right, so 10 years from now.
Yes.
Okay. It's Halloween time. Some YouTuber is doing their like Halloween movie marathon that all movie reviewer YouTubers do, right?
Sure.
They bust this one out, and they watch after probably the whole 10 years, and they give their little review. How do you think this type of movie will age over time?
So I feel that because it's such a self-contained movie, right? Like, other than the Evil Dead reference, like, I feel like it's such a self-contained story. It's such a like the most like topical thing in the movie is maybe the fact that they are on their 10th album. Yeah. Like, who knows what they'll be on in 10 years? I feel like that helps the movie not feel as aged with time, right? Yes. The fact that the kills are practical. Like, people love practical kills, and those are the things that usually stand the test of time. For sure. You go back and watch movies like The Thing, and you see like the stomach opening up, and it's like all practical effects. Like, all that shit still holds up, and so I feel like because that thing alone will help this movie stand better in 10 years than like if it was heavily like CG with a bunch of like pop culture references. I know it's been about a week since we watched it. I cannot remember there being like a specific like pop culture reference that I was like, oh, that's not gonna hold.
No, and this is okay. So then thematically, this is something that I was very interested in like the day or two after getting out of the theater. So there is that like little line that Jeff Garlin drops at the end, right? Which is why I kind of wanted more exposition from his angle at the beginning. But anyway, I digress. He's talking to Dave Grohl, and he's like, "Yeah, like no one listens to like this kind of music anymore, right?" And I'm not going to take this podcast as an opportunity to go like sad white guy and be like, nobody listens to rock. But I mean, I think that's what kind of makes this movie interesting for me, because even though the Foo Fighters are like well beloved, I think their last like 2.5 albums are just very meh, right? And then this really, that type of music really isn't true pop culture anymore. I'm not saying like it's totally obscure, but like it certainly doesn't carry the type of clout that it did. And I think if I were to redo this movie, I would love to see that kind of angle explored more, even though it's kind of cliche. But I think that's also where it kind of has the freedom to not be like so pop culture reference heavy and just the self-contained shit, because they're not really. I mean, they themselves, they are pop culture because of how famous they are, but sure. In terms of like what have you done for me lately, they're not. So it almost has kind of it almost kind of gives it the freedom to like just be itself and be what it wants to be.
Yeah, and I think kind of just to reiterate, I think that's one of the things that's going to make this movie work, right? I could see this being a movie that I watch every year around Halloween.
Yeah.
I could definitely see myself adding this to my repertoire. Like every year, I have a couple movies that I always watch. You know, I watch. Last year, I added *Malignant*. I know you weren't so hot on it, but like I'm adding that to my list. I have movies like *Hereditary*, *Midsummer*, *Evil Dead*. I'm probably gonna be rewatching *Ash vs. Evil Dead* again. You know, this is just a movie that I feel like is good enough that I can watch it, shut off everything, even if it means maybe cutting off like the last 10 minutes of it.
Yeah.
Or just have it in the background while I'm grading or while I'm playing a game.
Or making a hot dog.
So I think it's, you know, it's as far as the movie is meant to kind of do its job, I think it did it very well.
I agree.
And just kind of to pivot a little bit into some facts. Right? Some facts.
Yeah.
So this is what I found very kind of like heartwarming. A lot of the people that I watched who reviewed this movie like for fun seem to really like this movie. People who I was not expecting to be like, I reviewed the fucking Foo Fighters movie. And a lot of people were like weirdly very positive. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I was expecting more people to be like very critical.
Reddit was critical.
Reddit, yeah, but Reddit's
Reddit did not like this movie.
Yeah, Reddit can go suck a dick.
Reddit can go suck a dick.
And you know, to that point, like the critics, right? So like if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have it at a 55%, with the average review being 5.5 out of 10. Which, all right, seems understandable. Horror movies already don't do well. And then on top of that, it's not a very well acted movie. The story is nothing to like, you know, be super amazed by. But the funny thing is, the audience score is 81%.
Ooh.
So very high audience score. And not only that, but the audience score is actually 4.1 out of 5.
So this just goes to show for me. If you had told me the audience score was really low, then I would have just said this is proof that the people are troglodytes. The audience score is relatively high, so I say, you know, this is proof that democracy. This is democracy manifest.
Yeah, and that's what this is about, right? Like they wanted to make this movie just like they make their albums, right? They make their albums for the fans. If they don't make an album for the fan is not going to buy it. They wouldn't be at 10 albums, right? They made this movie because they wanted something new and they wanted it for the fans. And clearly, like, it shows to me that the fans overall kind of liked it. And that's, at the end of the day, that's really what matters, right?
I was going to say, isn't that what art is all about?
Yeah, and, you know, I am very happy that we were able to make time to go see this. It's very easy to look at a horror movie coming out in February and being like, oh, fucking hell, no way.
Or you could be like, fucking hell, yeah, way.
And it depends, right? Like, this movie, I think from the very beginning, we were both like, we're gonna go see this, regardless.
For sure.
And I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's gonna be on anyone's top 10 of the year by any stretch. Yeah. Unless the year really takes a shit, unless we get COVID Part 5 and theaters shut down.
Russian COVID.
Unless Russia ruins White Boy Summer.
Which they could.
Which could then mean that this is one of the only good movies that comes out this year. Which wouldn't that be a fucking trip?
If we get another canceled year for a non-pandemic related reason, I think that's just a sign that we have to call this decade of quits.
I think so too.
Yeah.
But do you have any final closing thoughts on this movie?
You know, it didn't get the best of me, but it got the very good of me. Well, that's all it needed to be.
And Yeah, that really is all it needs to be. There doesn't need to be anything else for this type of movie. It's a silly movie with a bunch of dudes just having fun, some solid music, and some pretty good practical kills. So other than the before we go, and other than the chainsaw kill, which obviously is the best one, do you have another favorite kill?
Like I said, Taylor Hawkins.
Taylor Hawkins.
I forget who gets killed in the grill, but that would be the third one.
That one was a funny one, mainly because of the callback with him shitting on Dave for burning his steaks.
Yeah, exactly.
It was pretty good foreshadowing and payoff, which I was like, this is funny. Yeah. But there was something inherently funny about the stupidity of Paul getting his head smashed by the car. Because he's under it trying to hotwire it.
And he's the oaf, right?
And he's the oaf.
He's just lovable and dopey.
Lovable and dope. And yeah, that was... those are my thoughts on the movie. Anything else that you want to add before we let our friends here go?
No, I think that's it. We just got to watch us during Halloween. I think it's set in stone. Yes,
I'm down with it. We can add this to the movie watch of Ma.
Yes.
I
have been trying to get my friends. So for our millions of fans at home, I have been trying to get my friends to watch Ma ever since Javi and I saw that fine piece of art in theaters when it came out, and I have yet to get anybody to watch Ma. But I think this is the year.
This is the year. We'll make it happen. We'll bully them into watching.
Yeah. Ma Party 2022.
Ma Party 2022. So if everything goes according to plan, we should be back in 2 weeks.
Sounds accurate.
And I think, again, if everything goes according to plan, we will be talking about The Batman.
Oops, sorry, wrong soundtrack.
Is it? But, it's funny. I was thinking about The Batman. I could not. I know I've seen that trailer so many times, and the score, the Batman theme has been like ingrained in my brain. I could not think of it today.
I can't sing it for you. I really like it though.
It's good. It's good. I want to get your take on it after you listen to it for 3 hours straight.
Excellent. That's what Batman is.
All right. Well, again, to everybody who has listened, all our single-digit listeners. Which is more than I thought.
Our 7-digit listeners.
Wonderful. If you enjoyed this discussion and you would like to hear more, please subscribe and share with your friends. We will be back again in 2 weeks with a movie discussion on The Batman. You can follow us at the Cinescoots. You don't have to follow either of us personal accounts. But until then...
You don't have to follow me in the streets either.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, until then, we have been the Cinescoots. I am Javier.
I'm Thano.
And we will see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.